Greetings and welcome to another installment of Active Training in the 21st Century, a Global Perspective. I'm Peter Zazzali, and today I'm delighted to be joined by such a dear friend and colleague, Heather Timms. Heather, it's great to see you. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, Peter. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for asking me.
It's my pleasure, and your voice is going to be so important to this conversation. So for our listeners, Heather is currently the Director of Active Training at Toi Whakaari, National Drama School of New Zealand. She has been there since 2012 and has made a significant difference in the training of the actors that have come through there, and by extension, New Zealand theater, New Zealand film, and I would even argue in many ways communities throughout New Zealand. Because Toi Whakaari is much more than an active training program. I say that with some personal experience, having had the transformational time that I spent with you and your colleagues and students last year in 2019 when I was in residence there for a bit. So that was rich.
Kia ora, Peter. That's lovely. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Well, and by way of introduction as well, just to give our listeners some idea of your enormous accomplishments, you're an accomplished theater maker, writer and director in particular, content creator, which of course gets manifest in your teaching to your students. And in many ways, you're first and foremost a teacher. You know, as I said earlier, it just makes a huge difference in the training and lives of your students. You were trained yourself at 𝘈𝘬𝘗𝘪𝘯𝘪𝘯 University, where you received your BA honors as well as a master's degree in socio-political theater making. And you're very much a conscious, you're very conscious of the community and the ways in which your work and the work of your students makes a difference in society. It's something I've always admired about you. So we're going to talk a bit this morning, or this afternoon in your case, about the training at Toi Whakaari. And Heather, what are some of the distinguishing attributes? What makes Toi Whakaari particular in your experience of being a teacher there, and somebody who's designed a curriculum as well that by which the actors learn on a daily basis?
Yeah, okay, great. Well, Toi Whakaari as a kura, or as a school, trains 5 different disciplines. So acting's one of those. So we also train managers, people, set and props, costume construction, design, and acting. So I'll speak specifically to the acting program. Yeah, so the things that I think are particularly distinct about what we're doing, about 8 years ago, we made a departure from the conservatoire model, which is followed by many across the globe. And the conservatoire model offered us such a lot of richness, but for us, it was for a particular time and place. And in our context, in the Pacific, that place is very different, and our times are very different now. So we have our actors now, they have to be able to be initiators, they need to be content creators, they need to have a level of independence, and they also need high quality screen training. So we moved away, and we really, I think I had a question about, I think so often, and I see conservatoire models training, and the outcome is 5, maybe 10% making it. And then what would it be if you designed a model of training where 100% of the actors that you train made it? And so it was really sort of re-looking at what does making it mean, and what do we need to be able to focus on for that to occur. So we train actors and we train artists. And in terms of the actor component of the training, it's about rigor, it's about discipline, it's in those fundamental crafts of the body and the voice and the imagination and the play, It has to do with text across live and screen. So things that I think are pretty universal in most actor trainings. And then the other part is the artistry. So we're really committed to developing the artistry of each person that comes into the school. And that means, how do we liberate and free up each individual actor's authentic individual voice? How do we give them the skills to be able to collaborate in environments without losing themselves? How do we give them the skills to be able to make their own work? So both live work and screen work. How do we ensure that they leave the kura as lifelong learners? Yeah, so it's interesting because I think that, as we have discovered now kind of 8 years in, that ambition that we're committed to also has a natural tension inside it, because there's something about the discipline and rigor required for the craft, and we're very committed to that. And then the anarchic freedom also required for an artistic voice. So I think that, you know, that is a demand for teachers working in the model that we have. And I think probably the other thing that's very distinct about what we're doing is our focus on training independence. When I came to the school, because before I moved into the acting program, I was working with 2 other colleagues, 𝘨𝑚𝑚𝑜𝑖𝑡𝑎𝑟𝑎 and Jade Erickson, and we were looking at how the school worked with the values and principles inside Te Ao Māori. But maybe I can talk about that a little bit later. But what was occurring was that actors were leaving the training, and they were it was almost like they were falling off an edge. And there was a level of, for many, maybe a level of crisis, because they were used to being held, and then to be independent and to drive all of these things themselves, as well as maintain their craft, was really challenging. So we really asked the question, how could we bring that struggle for independence inside the training rather than leave it till once they left? And that works both in the craft side and also in the artistic side. So we run a program called self-directed craft training, and we scaffold that from first year through to third year. And from their morning classes where they're learning skills, they have several 1-hour classes before lunch where they have to work on integrating all the different threads of their actor craft into their own self-directed craft inquiry. So how do they plan it? How do they manage it? How do they execute it? And how do they keep building it? And that's under very strong supervision from staff in first year, and then increasingly less by the time we get to third year. And then on the artistic side, we have a program called independent practice. And that's where students are given time to self-direct their own creative projects. And maybe the easiest way to look at that is that one of the terms in the final year, in third year, is given over to the students to self-direct either the making of a piece of work, the making of a film, a particular craft inquiry. We have an amount of contestable funding, so the students can apply for money to be able to support what they do. And the fruits of their labour are presented in a festival we call the Festival of Work in Development. Yeah, so I would say they're key distinctive elements.
Well, thank you. And Heather, and it was so beautifully put. And in those elements within what you've just shared, you talked about training the individual artist and their particular voice and fostering that over the course of 3 years. And there's also this element of difference, and there's a tension inherent to that. So how do you all at Toi Whakaari manage those differences? Differences that occur in any one of a number of contexts, right? Differences in rehearsals, differences in discussions, differences in terms of identity, personal identity for that matter. How do you manage that in such a way that independence flourishes? And I say that quite consciously because we tend, I mean, from a Western ethos, we tend to regard difference as competitive, contentious, and that's not, if I'm not mistaken, that's really not at all what's going on in Toi Whakaari. It's in a remarkable collaborative community within which difference becomes an important component of the learning. Does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's probably a combination of the way in which we've sequenced and structured the training. So in our first year, we are really working to push difference forward. So we're really wanting our actors to differentiate themselves, because there's always such a kind of a desire to norm. Groups want to norm and become similar, but it's a process of also educating the students to the value of the uniqueness of their own voice. And actually, collaborations are stronger if all the voices inside them are their most unique self. And, you know, a way we would do that, I mean, we've got lots of ways of doing that, but, you know, at the end of the first year of training, each actor makes a solo work. So that's a very practical, artistic, craft-driven way in which we suddenly see, after a year of training, 22 very unique voices. I mean, I would say that's a thing we pride ourselves on, is that at the end of 3 years, every actor is different from each other.
Yet they've arrived at it together. They've arrived at that journey together in their own particular way.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I think that a school culture promotes particular things. So we promote and support people speaking up, people standing by their own point of view, but then also fostering deep learning, deep listening, so that they can be moved and changed by another in order to keep growing. So it's not a belligerence, it's a deep curiosity in the uniqueness of us as humans.
Indeed. And of course, New Zealand is a bicultural country, and bicultural is, you know, is kind of a loaded term because it suggests a binary. And yet, there are ways in which indigenous and shall we say, those descending from colonial background, there are ways in which historically throughout New Zealand, those two identities have coalesced and worked through their own differences. How does Toi Whakaari operate as a bicultural institution reflective of a greater national identity?
Yeah, great question. Because Toi Whakaari is the national drama school of New Zealand, and so it has a bicultural mandate. So it is mandated to wrestle with these questions of everybody's relationship to te ao Māori. And the school has been on a long and rich and rigorous journey with that challenge. And I think one of the challenges that I saw when I came into the school alongside Tina and Jade was that inside a conservatoire model, which is a European model, with all the best intentions, working then with Te Ao Māori, it can be othered. So it becomes peripheral, and that people can then perform in 𝘭𝘰𝘣𝘢 or in particular rituals and practices. But the question that, led by Tēnā Moitara, the question we were wrestling with was the school now in the position to be able to put the values, practices and frameworks of Te Ao Māori in the centre, not on the periphery? And then what would that mean, both for the culture of the school, the framing up of the curriculum, and for staffing, for the whole life of the school. So that was an investigation that we began now over 11 years ago. And then I moved into the acting department 8 years ago as we started to go, okay, and now how do we embed it? And that was the impetus to start to redesign the actor training.
And how's that investigation continuing today? Because it is a process, and it's a process that
It is, yeah, it is an ongoing piece of work, Peter, and it needs to be. That these things are not fixed or static. I mean, last weekend, one of the things that happens at the school is that we have gone away on noho marae, which means all 150 people in the school have travelled 7 hours up north to Taina's marae. He's from the 𝘈𝘬𝘢𝘵𝘳𝘍𝑒𝑟𝑜𝑛𝑔𝑎 to keep learning in situ about these frameworks and practices. But with our current situation, that was not possible this year. And so Taina and his partner Ngāpaki came and we had a wānanga.
For our listeners, a wānanga is, how would you characterize that?
Well, a wānanga is a particular look at how you learn. So you don't learn passively. It requires each person to engage with the focus of whatever is being discussed. And so that meaning is developed collaboratively with everyone in the room. But it also means that it happens durationally. So it's not a class, it happens over time. So our wānanga was 2 days. Normally our noho marae is for 5 days. I was reflecting with you earlier was that although there was a sadness that we couldn't go back up to Manatuki in Gisborne, there was a richness because we often, it's a piece of work to keep translating what we learn on noho marae back into the school. Whereas here we were in a unique position where it was happening within the school. And I think the questions of translation and application were that much more present with us last weekend.
Oh, wonderful. So the work you've done over the course of your career, particularly in the last 8 years at Toi Whakaari, really has been transformational. And I say that from a very personal perspective, because I know it was transformational for me when I had the honor of being with you all for 7 months this past year. What Heather, as a trainer, as a teacher, as an artist, as someone who's just predisposed to making a difference in the lives of others and serving your community, what is it, if I may ask, that you value the most about your journey at Toi Whakaari? or what are some of the leading, what are some of the outstanding practices that you have in the great work that you do on a daily basis?
Well, there's maybe two questions in there.
Sure.
Or maybe I've heard two, because personally, what has been most profound is I have never encountered an institution that is so willing to risk and to be brave and bold. And because we are small, the organisation is able to be incredibly responsive. So, you know, there are challenges with being small, funding and, you know, resources and all of those things. But what it does allow for is incredible innovation. And I think that it attracts people to it who are deeply interested in some of the big questions around education and arts. So that's on a personal level. In terms of key things that that I think can you repeat that second part of your question, Peter?
Oh, it's wonderful. No, and you pretty much answered it.
All right.
What is, you know, what triumphs, celebrations do you have, you know, on behalf of your students and team, you know, on any given day after any given experience, like coming out of 𝘈𝘰𝘵𝘳𝘊, for example? I mean, it's just such a, you know, it's such an enormous uplifting experience for everyone. What is that like? What is it like to experience that on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to work at the school and with the students that we work with. We have worked hard to keep enriching the demographic of the students that come into the school. So as a national drama school, we are charged with the responsibility and pleasure of telling the stories of New Zealand. So, I mean, I might be going on a bit of a tangent here, but we have actively worked at continuing to try and diversify our student body. So it means, how do we engage with the rural areas? How do we engage from the top of the country to the bottom of the country? How do we keep making our application processes accessible enough so students feel that they can come? Because I think that sometimes these things can be quite inaccessible, and particularly if the focus is purely on text, I think it can actually get in the way of really being able to see the huge talent that might be there. So, yeah, we've really redesigned as well our whole application process to make it far more joyful, rigorous, but accessible as well. But how is it to be there? I mean, I think for all the people you will have talked to, yourself included, Peter, working in the arts, you know, it's a calling. It's hard work, but I am daily stimulated by the desire by myself and the team for innovation and constant evolution. That's why I'm still there. I've never been in one place this long, but we are committed to continually learning and evolving what we're doing based on the questions that we're asking.
Indeed, and asking those questions and answering them as you and your colleagues do is indeed a calling. And I think so many people are better off, you know, that because this calling was yours. I know I am. Heather, it's such a pleasure to talk with you today. This is Heather Timms, Director of Actor Training at Toi Whakaari, the National Drama School of New Zealand. A very special place being led in no small part by a very special trainer and colleague. Thanks so much, Heather. Kia ora. Ngā mihi. Thank you so much.
Oh, kia ora, Peter. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Lovely to talk to you.
Indeed. Lovely to talk to you too. Bye now.